Hi, today is September 24th, and we're here with Tony McCombie, the Republican state representative in the 71st District, who is running for re-election. I'm Tammy Sloop, regional editor for Shaw Media, and I'm joined by Sauk Valley Media editor Erlene Hinton and Sauk Valley Media reporter Tim Eggert. Thanks for meeting with us today, Tony.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Why don't we start out with you telling us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for re-election?
Well, I think, some of your viewers may not know, I'm from Savannah, which is the most northern part of the district, mostly born and raised here. We moved around a little bit. My mom married a military man when I was 6, so we were lucky enough to move around a little bit, which probably helped with my ability to meet folks. So we moved to Iowa and Alaska and moved back to Savannah when I was a sophomore. Went to Western, lived in Peoria for a short period of time, and then moved back to Savannah. I always say the good ones come home. So all those folks that have their kids leaving their hometowns, don't worry, we all come back eventually. So got into banking and insurance industry, had a small business. I missed a promotion at a company that I worked at, thought I deserved it. They gave me a raise, so I stayed, and then I decided to start my own business when I didn't get it again. And with my mother, I told my mom, I'm going to open up a restaurant. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. She said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. She goes, okay, I'll help you. So that's what we did. And that got me involved. Yeah, right. Because I grew up in the food and beverage industry. My grandparents owned, and my aunts and uncles owned restaurants and taverns, and so I've just always known that helped me pay through college. And I was always the kid in high school that had the cash because I worked at Ann's Cafe, and so really just have a diverse background in different things. I had a bed and breakfast, and I'm a realtor now. I have my own real estate appraisal company, which has really changed with the recession, and just how you redevelop yourself with huge changes in the workplace. We got involved with the chamber, which got me involved with city government, got upset, ran for mayor, and through the mayor, I got upset and ran for office, and here I am.
When you, what upset you that prompted you to run for mayor?
There was a vote in a finance committee, and when it got to the city council meeting that night, it changed. And so when I raised my hand and asked why the vote was changed or the decision was made from the finance committee to the council, I was told, welcome to the world of politics. And I was like, nope, not in Savannah, Illinois. We're nonpartisan. No way. This is a small town. And it just kind of burned me a little bit. So I ran, and I'm just getting started. I'm just finishing my 4th year. We really haven't been in Springfield this much this year because of COVID. Leaving, in February, we were back for a few days in May, which means we couldn't do much harm to taxpayers if we're not there passing bad legislation by any means. But we're also not able to pass good legislation either. So I'm just getting started. I've had, for the most part, I've enjoyed the position. Really met a lot of colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and I feel I have the ability to work with both sides of the aisle, to really work with folks that want to make positive change, have good intent, and I think that's where you start.
You also said that something upset you that prompted you to run for state rep. What was that?
Well, at the time, I had asked the representative at the time, don't forget Savannah. We're your most northern part, the smallest voter pool. Don't forget us. We used to be a thriving community, a community of 5,000 people, had an Army depot that was chosen to close. Back in the heyday, had 10,000 people at the Army depot, and really need help, really need to be remembered, and just kind of weren't. So it just upset me. So I feel that no matter the size, whether it's Deer Grove or if it's Rock Island, we all have the same voice. No different than Sterling compared to Chicago. There's no voice that's more important than another.
The shape of the district is a little odd. Why don't you talk to viewers about, the towns and the bigger towns involved in that, and just it's just a very weird shape. When I was looking it up, like I said, I'm filling in for Kathleen, so I looked at the map and I said, "Wow."
Yeah, so if you look at all of the districts, a lot of them, you think when you're looking at legislative districts that it's going to be by counties or it's going to be, squares. That's not how it works. So every 10 years, which we're on the census, so reminding voters, fill out your census, or residents, you don't have to be a voter to everybody fill out your census, but every 10 years the maps are redrawn. So it could get a little more wacky looking next time, which we'll be voting on next year. So I have parts of Carroll, most of Whiteside, parts of Rock Island, and parts of Henry. So basically from Savannah to the north, think about following the river all the way down to the Quad Cities and to a little bit of Henry County, Kelowna and Cleveland, but it juts over to Whiteside County, basically all of Whiteside County, except for about 800 voters. I wasn't around, obviously that was 10 years ago for the remap. That's one of the things when you talk about political reform is a remap. There's sometimes folks that don't vote during the primary because they have to declare whether they're a Republican or a Democrat. And people say, well, how can you politically reform Illinois? Well, there's several things you could do. One is you could have an independent fair map. So not have the political parties choosing the lines. You could not have choosing the Republican or Democrat ticket, at a primary, so people feel more comfortable voting. But so far in Illinois, that's not happening. So it could get a little wackier. We're anticipating me to be mapped out, actually, of my district, so I'll have to move.
Tony, what did the map look prior to 10 years ago?
So 10 years ago, I know we had Mount Carroll was in the district, which is confusing because some folks still, and I'm from this area and my husband's from Mount Carroll. And so after voting day, they'll be like, why didn't I get to vote for you? And so it's still some confusion there. But I represent parts of Carroll County, and it doesn't matter to me if it was Andrew Chesney, who is a Republican, or if it was a Democrat. It's no different. In 72, that's Representative Halpin, who's a Democrat. If somebody calls our office, we're going to take care of them and help them, and then let their counterparts know, whether it be Sally or Dawn in the office, how we can, help them. It doesn't matter where you're from. We had a call from somebody in Chicago the other day about a FOID issue. We're like, how did you get our number? And they said, well, we heard that you were able to help out with FOID. And my Liz in the office is like, uh-oh, our number is somewhere. So, it's just, we all have to be able to work together, and it's about constituent service. And when we're in the minority, especially, constituent service is the biggest part of what we can do to make a difference.
So Tony, you'd mentioned that your upbringing was in pretty much hospitality. It sounded like restaurants and bars. So how do you feel Illinois' response has been to COVID-19? I know it's hit a lot of those businesses especially hard, or at least they're the most visible. So what, if anything, would you have done as governor that maybe you could talk a little bit about today, or things that you agreed with?
Okay, well, when this all started, whether it's on the federal or the state side or even local, I think everybody was like, oh no, what do we do? What is this? And we have learned so much more. So I think for us to point fingers at anybody at the beginning on their reaction would be wrong of any of us to do that, because we just didn't know. Now, as things has progressed, I feel in Illinois, and I can only speak on Illinois, and I've been pretty verbal about it. We in the House and Senate we're a co-equal branch of government to the executive branch, and the lack of conversation with the governor's administration, with the governor, has not been good. I believe we have been elected, as he was, to represent our districts. And I can tell you, I know my district better than he does. But even if he is going to be making decisions about my district or my businesses, especially being next door to Iowa, and just 25 minutes south of Wisconsin, I would have appreciated a phone call and a conversation. But we had an opportunity in May to go and discuss this as a group. We were in a very safe environment, and we could have had those conversations to decide how to proceed with the process. I don't believe running a state or a nation through executive orders is the way to do it. That's not the process. That shouldn't be that way. But it is what we have to deal with, and it's very unfortunate. The other thing is we have a pandemic plan in place, and I trust our health departments. They have dealt with nothing like this by any means, but other viruses, and they have processes. But Illinois does have a pandemic plan in place that would put more management on our local counties, which I think would have given the public a little more peace and a little more trust. But really a big piece in Illinois that I think we've seen a huge failure and still is a big issue is the unemployment. And the governor's administration has to own that. It's still, right now today, we still, I believe, have about 70 people on our list that have not been called back, have not been paid since March. And when the government tells you you can't go to work, and a lot of those are the food and beverage industry, when they tell you you can't go to work, they have to help you. They have to help you. I had a gentleman call. I've been dealing with him. He's got 3 kids, works in the, he's a server, and has to pay child support. And his ex-wife doesn't care that he doesn't have, she has bills too. The courts aren't caring that he's not paying child support. There's no moratorium on child support. He still has to figure it out. He could go to jail, and that's not going to benefit him or his children.
So, Tony, I guess it sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you don't necessarily disagree with the measures that were taken early on in the COVID. You disagree with the fact that there was no communication to local leaders. Is that a fair statement or not?
Yes, I would agree with that. And I don't agree today with how it is still not, we're still not being communicated with. I believe now, for me, we keep hearing it's about the science. It's about the science. Show me the science. Be transparent about it. Help me carry the water. Let me help you, Governor, carry the water with my district. Let me communicate to my constituents, his constituents as well, what's going on. I don't know why he wants to do it alone. I really don't. The lack of transparency has, for me, and the constituents that are negatively communicating to me, really have an issue with that. And the back and forth, not knowing. Just on Monday, when he spoke, him and Dr. Ezike, when they said, you have somebody who's in the hospital or a long-term care, and they are, a person, and they're getting tested for 7 days, and those are 7 tests, and those 7 positives go to our numbers, that seems odd to me. I feel like that should be a different set of numbers. And then Dr. Ezike says, well, that's a number. A positive is a positive, but it's the same person. So it just seems like it's skewing things. It'll be interesting when this is all said and done, how they break out all of the numbers. But overall, I think, the washing your hands, the CDC, keeping the 6-foot distance. I'm a fan of the masks, especially when you're in big groups. I think if you're a vulnerable population, when I'm going to go be seeing, somebody in my family that is vulnerable, I'm very aware of where I've just been and wearing a mask.
Tony, one of the frustrations we've had is trying to cover this is that you'd mentioned that it should be put in the local hands of the health departments. We've seen a wide variety of how each health department handles it. handles outbreaks, handles announcements, handles sharing of information, even if any, contact tracing. So, I think it sounds really good to say let the local health departments deal with it, but you have a real disparity between finances in some counties versus other counties. So how do you rectify that when you're trying to fight a global pandemic, especially in your district where across the Mississippi River, it's a completely different set of, state rules. So how do you do that?
Sure. So the plan that is in place in Illinois, the pandemic plan that is in place and online for us all to view, the health departments could follow that plan. Then all of the health departments would be following the same plan.
Okay, but like, for
But they would
example,
be managing it.
right, because in Carroll County, they made basically a statement, and I'm going to use Poopies as an example. Go ahead and open. We're not going to come in and do any of the enforcement that was issued. So your issue is with the executive order, not what's, because the health department restrictions were pretty clear too. And Poopies just said, we're going to do it. And Carroll County said, you know what, we're not going to hassle them.
Well,
How do you respond to that?
yeah, in their particular case, they had an attorney.
Right.
So I think their attorney advised them. I'm not familiar with the particulars of that advisement. But I believe a lot of restaurants and bars just opened. It was either we are going to close, and whether I agree with it or disagree with it, or you do, or any of us do, it's irrelevant. But I think a lot of the mindset was, I'm going to close because I have no business, or I'm going to close because the state's attorney is going to close me down. So either way, in their mind, I'm closing. I'm losing my livelihood.
Right, but I guess my point is, every county has elected officials, and if those elected officials get the idea that they're not going to enforce, let's say in a perfect world it was the health department rules, and they say, you know what, we're going to look the other way, how do you enforce that?
Yeah, I think the way the direction from the governor and from the IDPH came was that during the hearing, and I'm not sure if you watched that, it was it was pretty interesting through Jay Carr. The only person that can actually prosecute is the state's attorney. So that there's the question, I believe, through the state's attorneys, and I'm not one, or even an attorney. The question is whether or not it's constitutional to continue the emergency declarations every 30 days. So I think that's the question. So whether or not they prosecute, will it be upheld? And there are cases right now in the courts. So unfortunately, I think that the case will be, in the end, this will all be done when the courts come out with their decisions. So I think with states' attorneys, for them to prosecute, they're going to be prosecuting, but they're not sure if it's constitutional to do it.
Okay, and then I just had one other COVID-related follow-up. You recently had a mobile testing come to Savannah. Do you know how many people actually took part in that?
I don't, but we have another one coming up this Sunday, actually. So this will be great. So a little plug. I just posted it yesterday, and I'll be posting it again. So it'll be in the old Shopko parking lot behind the Dollar General. So hopefully folks will be coming if they feel the need to get tested. Hopefully they will.
Because we had one in Ogle County with Forston and Mount Morrison, there were under 25. So I was just curious if you had any indication on Savannah numbers, because we've seen an increase. We just had an issue from Whiteside County regarding Majestic Pines, which is in your district. So I just was curious if people are going to get tested more so, or if there was some type of encumbrance on why they weren't being tested before. So I wonder if you could shed any light on that, and then I'll shut up about the COVID.
Well, it is a big part of our world right now, hence the reason we're not sitting around a table together. So it's okay.
Okay.
I don't know the exact reason. I think probably one, they're more rural areas, so you have you don't have the population of people coming through like you would maybe in Whiteside County, smaller towns, smaller communities. Also, personally for me, I've been tested several times and I feel, gosh, I'm not having any symptoms, but I need to do this because I'll be quite honest, whether it be for political reasons or I'm going to be around another group of people, or the state has asked me to do so because I was just in session. So I feel bad taking a test when I know there's not a lot of tests. The direction at the beginning was, unless you're having these symptoms, don't come. Even now today, I had somebody call me yesterday and said, hey, where can I get a free test? I go on to IDPH. Everywhere I looked, it was, please call for an appointment and do you have symptoms? So even though the state is saying, go, 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 tests are available, are they? I don't think so. So I think that still, if you're not having symptoms, folks are not going. Even if you see a pop-up mobile testing, they're like, well, I'm kind of curious, but I don't have symptoms, so I'm not going to go. That would be my assumption, but you know what they say about assuming.
Yeah.
But, you know, for example, I wouldn't go on Sunday unless I was having symptoms.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And the actual test is not pleasant, so.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. But it's, for those out there, you'll survive. I do have a video so you can see that I live, and I kind of even giggle for a minute. So
Aside from COVID, you know, how would you rate Pritzker's overall performance? Now, I know a lot of it has to do with COVID because that's taken over our lives since March, but aside from that.
So do I get a rating of good, average, poor, or?
You could grade them, you could give them, like you said, good, average, poor, and then just more concerned with you explaining why.
Yeah, I'll say overall average, to be quite honest. I think I would say poor in communication with the legislators at the beginning, having the daily updates, you know, at 2:30. I think they started getting a little political, which kind of made me stop watching. And then I'd be like, oh, but I need to figure out what, I was watching it just like everybody else was to get the news. So I think communication, definitely poor. Some of the agencies, poor. But overall, I mean, I believe him and his administration has our safety in mind. As long as it's not about politics and about control, then I'll continue to say average.
Do you think Mike Madigan should resign?
Definitely should resign his leadership position. Absolutely. I join his colleagues on the other side of the aisle that have stepped up and said the same. Absolutely. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the fair tax amendment?
Well, I'm not a fan. I voted no in Springfield. People ask, you know, well, why? You know, this is going to generate more money. And, you know, Republicans are the party of no. Well, that's not true. There's several reasons I'm no. One of the biggest reasons I'm a no is we pay a graduated tax right now on our federal side. So we're familiar with the process and how it works. In Illinois, we have not been a good steward of the tax dollars for a long time. We have shown that if given more money, we don't spend it properly. We just don't. We're not working on the biggest issue in Illinois, which is our property tax. We don't fund our schools properly. There's no guarantee on how the money's going to be spent. They say, well, it's going to go for our backlog. It's going to go for education. It's going to go for pension. Who says? Who says? It's only going to be the top earners. Who says? The only thing that we're voting on in November is how we change how we tax our income. That's it. The rates that were passed before are not necessarily the rates that are going to be the rates. We will have to vote again, and I guarantee you those rates will be increased, and the reason they will be increased will be blamed on COVID. I'm telling you, there's going to be such an issue with the budget as there was an issue. We were $1 billion out of budget without the $5 billion of COVID borrowing already. But also, just think about in general, we're not evaluating any of our other tax structures. We're not looking at our sales tax, our use tax, our property tax. How do you change one tax structure without looking at all the others? So there's always unintended consequences when you're doing something in Springfield. Even in our own homes, we make decisions with unintended consequences. So I don't think you can change one tax system without evaluating them all. So, but I always say, you know, if you trust Springfield with your dollars, vote for it. If you don't, don't.
So, Tony, you'd mentioned earlier the frustration with people trying to get unemployment after the, they lost their job, whether it be COVID or other issues. How do you propose in your district retaining jobs and also adding jobs?
Well, we have for a long time in Illinois, and one of the reasons I wanted the position as well is to stop passing bad policy that is chasing businesses out of Illinois and is allowing other states to flirt with businesses and attract them to leave. It's hard when another state will send a letter or send a team into one of our manufacturing settings and say, hey, we've got a brand new building that's going to triple the size of your square footage. We're not going to have you pay property taxes for 10 years, no income. We're going to incentivize you to come to our state, bring your employees, we're going to set you up. How do you not do it? Especially when we're not doing anything to help with the property tax. We're not doing anything to help with the workers' comp. We're not doing anything to help with tort reform. I mean, just doing things to increase bad policy. So I think if we could and should, and I don't think it would be that hard, if we would start passing good policy that to grow our businesses, it would in turn grow our population, attract people. We would be in a much better place. I mean, Illinois is positioned in the Midwest. We have great transportation lines. We have so much opportunity. We shouldn't be in this position. We could be a growth state, and we're not because of bad policy.
What are your top priorities, and how do you propose accomplishing these if you're reelected?
Well, pretty simple. Top priorities in Illinois should be ethics reform. That's a biggie. And structural reform, bringing fiscal sanity. I've been saying that since day one. With that fiscal sanity comes growth. Property tax reform, balancing a budget. My goal is to vote on a budget. I mean, that's what we're there for. And I want to vote on a budget that works. Vote on a budget that's going to put people to work, it's going to grow our businesses. The more we have here, the more income that we have coming into our state is a way that we will then have more programs, more social services, more things that are going to help with the inequalities and disparities that we have in our educational system.
What specifically with ethics reform?
Well, did you know that I could be a lobbyist right now today as a legislator for Sterling?
Yep.
That is terrible. That is a terrible idea. So I could be getting paid by the city of Sterling, and you don't think that's not going to affect how I vote? That's a terrible idea. You can get rid of that for one. For me to, I could quit my job today in the middle of my term and be a lobbyist tomorrow. The revolving door, I don't think that's a great idea. I don't know what the best time frame would be for that, but certainly that's not a great idea. Our economic statement, anybody that's ever filled one of those forms out, we call it the NA form. That's a joke. Not having to really explain what you're filling out. For example, I remember when I first got in, our attorney said, "You put NA on all your form." And I said, "Well, yeah, it's the NA form." And because I filled it out as mayor and as city council, he goes, "Well, you're a realtor." And I said, "Well, and an appraiser." And I said, "Well, what's that have to do with it?" And he said, "Well, there's a place there for professional services." And I said, "I don't do anything for a county, or I choose not to do anything for a county or the state on those because I just don't want any conflict." And he said, "It doesn't matter. You have to put that." And I was like, "Oh, okay." People just don't know. I mean, so to have full transparency on that form, that's another. I mean, I don't think you have enough time to really go into this.
Hey, Tony, though, some of those are also federal. I mean, you can be a lobbyist the minute you give up your Congress seat. So, I mean, that's just not a state-specific problem.
Right.
So you see it as a larger ethical problem that spreads across the current administration as well?
Well, I'll be honest, I'm not overly familiar with the federal issues. I'm concentrated on Illinois. We've got enough issues right here, so I like to concentrate here, but certainly willing to pass on my opinion the more I learn on the federal side. But yeah, I mean, we're supposed to be in a position for the people. We shouldn't, as legislators, we shouldn't be benefiting from our position. I shouldn't be getting, there's none of us should be getting a state contract. I mean, I shouldn't, I shouldn't know about a project that's coming, a road project that's coming, buy up land around it, and then get rich off of it. Mm-hmm. That happens. That happens.
Right.
That's not what the purpose is.
What about campaign finance reform?
Oh, it's the worst part of the job is raising money. Ugh. Yeah, let's not raise any money. That'd be great. That's how let's reform it. Let's spend no money. Yeah, that's tough. This is a very expensive business, and you have people making money year-round on it. People don't realize it. You talked about the signs when we first, I don't know if we were on the air then, but talking about having signs, who makes money on that? Everybody makes money on that. The design, the structure, if there's the union bug on it, if the H brackets, every piece of it. People giving $20 or $100 or the max out $5,000, whether you're a person or corporate, or whether you break your limits. It's a huge business. I mean, you think about it. I think Michael Madigan, I think, has he did before we all started, $14 million. He can use his campaign dollars for his legal fund. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Is that right? I say no. I mean, when somebody gives me, when a person gives me a $5 check, which I love, because that's a vote. When somebody gives me that, that's not to defend me because I've just done something unethical. I mean, that shouldn't be allowed. So definitely, I think there should be, and then think about it this way. And I've never given to a federal candidate before until this year, but we can have a max out of 5,000 plus. A federal can only do 1,000. So it's a little bit different, So yeah, definitely there has to be some campaign finance reform, and until there is, that's going to be a big part of our position.
Mm-hmm. So, Tony, I had two quick questions here that are right in your district. What is happening, if anything, with the Savannah Army Depot? And I know you're a West Carroll alum, right?
Well, Savannah,
okay. So you had spoke at a school board meeting about the attempts to move the high school to Mount Carroll. Do you know any statuses on either one of those topics? They're very different. One's education and one's economic development. But
yeah, So the Savannah Army Depot, if you have an opportunity to drive up there, I mean, it's
Yeah.
amazing to go up there and spend a day. They're working extremely hard through the authority, the LRA and the Port Authority. Uh, Mara is the executive director, and they have a board really working hard. They have some businesses up there. They're trying. They're really
Okay.
trying. The biggest issue that they have up there is they don't have natural gas.
Yeah, I noticed that it's a great place to go bird watching. So selfishly, I kind of like going there, but it's also creepy with all those old buildings. But anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
And yeah, and as for West Carroll, it's not so much necessarily about moving the high school. We years ago, after I graduated, already consolidated to a unit district. And I just don't believe with the information that was provided and after investigating it with a group of community members, I don't believe and still don't believe that we have the numbers to go down one more school building. I'm not saying it's not coming, but we just don't have. And even right now today, a parent has contacted me. Her daughter had opted not to go to school and has changed her mind. She's doing the remote learning and is failing and wants to go to the hybrid, and they won't allow her to because there's no room. So that alone in the COVID world, that would have been a big deal.
Yeah. Okay.
So
We're coming up on the 40-minute hour or 40-minute spot here, so I want to get the last couple questions in for you. How would you advocate for the district's agricultural economy?
well, we all should. It's our number one industry in Illinois. I think over $8 billion income coming into our state. One of the biggest things I think that we have to remember is that the government often has an opinion, and we need to oftentimes keep our opinions out of business. And this is a big, big business. We need to respect property rights. And another thing that is happening is, and maybe people don't realize, is in Illinois with the estate tax, and I had a bill, we take more in Illinois on their estate tax than even the federal government. So rather than remove an estate tax, which is a bill out there, so I had a bill to even match the federal government. So let's take the same amount of tax on an estate tax. So we have to respect property rights is one of the biggest issues that we have. And it's getting very hard in Illinois for the small family farmer. And one thing that has started to come to light, which, farmers don't like to talk about it, but are starting to be more open to the idea, and especially in a COVID world, is the the suicide rate with farmers. We have to start talking about the mental health in our industries. So I would say less regulation, not opening up safety issues. I'm not saying that whatsoever. Farmers are very good stewards of the land and will protect the land and the environment. Property rights, modifying the Illinois estate tax, and concentrating on their mental health.
So, Tony, when you say that, a lot of farmers have to purchase their independent insurance. So do you have any suggestions? It's easy. Mental health is expensive, too. So, I mean, how do you justify, or how would you help the farmers get that type of help in our current system?
Well, that would be a huge federal issue. I think there again, the Affordable Care Act, was something that was passed with good intent, that unfortunately raised a lot of rates. So that definitely is something that is a much bigger issue that needs to be addressed for sure.
So you see that as a federal issue, not necessarily something that at a state level?
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah, I certainly am not a fan of universal health care. So.
Okay. Before we conclude, Tony, we want to give you an opportunity, you know, to talk with us a little more about why people should reelect you and maybe some key differences between you and your opponent.
Well, just to speak about myself, I have experience, a diverse experience with, a corporate world, self-employed. Uh, I'm a, I've, I've got a record showing that I can work across the aisle and that I do work across the aisle. I think that's important, especially with us being in the minority. Most downstate districts are in the minority. We have to be willing and able to have conversations. I'm a fierce advocate for our district. I communicate. People know where we are, and I think that is how we make change. I have a record showing that I want financial reforms. I have a record showing that I'm willing to fund education. Us breaking a promise this year, shortchanging education, is horrible. I have a record showing that I support labor. I have a record showing that I support families. So that's where my record speaks for itself. People aren't always going to agree with me, but I'm always open to having a conversation on why I vote, and know there's always something in a bill, very simple, that could be changing the whole thing. There's a bill right now, about women, and obviously I'm a woman, and I'm not going to vote against women, but when you have a bill that is going to have substandard care, I'm not going to vote for that. But one word can change an entire bill, and then you vote for it. So sometimes we can catch things in Springfield. A lot of bills are big, and people are writing bills, and people make mistakes, but it's our job to try to correct them. So that's oftentimes why you see amendments. So my record should speak for itself and my experience.
Okay. Well, I think that concludes our interview today. Thank you very much, Tony, for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.